like to let you in, but I've met some wolves in sheepskin. Seem to be soft and benign until they show their canines. Show me those canines. You say you're not all like that. You say you wear a white hat. Pardon me if I call bullshit, but you've had a lifetime to prove it. Prove it. Don't apologize. Show me what's inside. If there's something you don't like, well, you can rearrange it. The truth is what you do. It's up to you to change it. I'm sorry to say you were taught wrong. There's more than one way to be strong. Stand on the neck of your sister, or reach out a hand to help lift her. Lift her. You have a key to my heart, but I own the land. You get to hold down sometimes, but these are my hands. These are my hands. Don't apologize. Show me what's inside. If there's something you don't like, well, you can rearrange it. The truth is what you do. It's up to you to change it. In this body since birth, I have to carefully choose every move. Stand my ground, prove my worth. Answer questions that aren't asked of you. If that seems strange, well, we can rearrange it. It's up to you, so tell the truth and follow through and change it. You have a key to my heart, but I own the land. You get to hold down sometimes, but these are my hands. These are my hands. These are my hands. I was your fire escape, I was your neon sunrise. I was your one way out, I was your exit sign. You put your hands on me, pushed right through. You put your hands on me, on your way to. I couldn't be what you wanted, 'cause you don't know what you want yet. You put your lips on mine, and it was right on time. I was right on time to be your fire escape, your neon sunrise. I was your one way out, I was your exit sign. You put your hands on me, pushed right through. You put your hands on me like it was nothing to you. You put your hands on me on your way to. Just a footnote in the tale of how you saved yourself. An inconvenient history in a book about somebody else. When I didn't buy your narrative, when my usefulness had been outlived, when you'd taken more than I could get. She was your fire escape, she was your neon sunrise. I saw you walk on by, I saw the exit signs. You put your hands on me, pushed right through. You put your hands on me and it was nothing to you. You put your hands on me, put your hands on me, put your hands on me on your way to, on your way to. Always on your way through. That night when I stole your car, windows down, alone in the dark. You lit a candle to my patron saint. I brought it back 3 a.m., not a scratch on the paint. It was a death wish disguised as a thrill, going 70 miles per hour down that hill with my eyes closed. It sealed up a hole I was sure just stretched on with no bottom. I thought it was the end of the road. I thought it was the end of the road. I thought it was the end of the road. But it goes on. you see your own hand without a mirror on the wall? Do you hear your own voice without an echo back? Filter out.
I don't know why I haven't done a fader for that, and I keep doing it manually. One of these days. So, here we are on Chapter 5, after a really ridiculous day. On the brighter side of things, discovery today, blue popcorn. That has brightened up things. And so, into the story of Jan, the Vanishing Boy, or the case of the Vanishing Boy. And if you recall, where we left off was that the sheriff and the van that frightens everyone was ready to, with a the sheriff had a warrant to take Jan away for unspecified crime so far. The Rhodes family was protesting on the grounds that he was a patient of theirs, and their lawyer shows up and then proclaims that Jan's killed 7 people, and that was the end of the chapter. When I read this, I did not catch, because it never, at least has yet, to talk about where this took place. And I had not picked up on the plantation narrative before. The southern accents, the white rolls, the large farm with the stone wall. Getting a bit of a Louisiana vibe from this. I don't know if that's accurate, but I think the first time when I read this as a kid, I thought it was like in Colorado or something like that. The real entertaining thing, and I say this knowing that I don't think I was ever consistent with Otis's voice twice, and Hecuba I was constantly struggling with. Let's see if I get any of the other voices anywhere close to what I was doing yesterday. Trying not so much for like a perfect voice, just trying to be consistent on the voices. That said, I'm perfectly willing to discard a voice if I feel like it's not right for the character as I find out more about them. And anything else I want to go into right now? I don't think so. Nothing. I mean, I've commented a bit on things as they went by. But I do think well, we'll get into that later, I think. Or did we already? Anyway, let's just get into the story. Chapter 5. Van. For a dreadful moment, Jan stood with his mouth hanging open, incapable of thought or movement. Then blind instinct made him whirl about and try to bolt from the hall. But the long arm of Heron Rhodes caught the back of his shirt and held him. "Easy, son," the old man said reassuringly. "Don't believe every tomfool silly thing you hear, even if it comes from a good lawyer. Just keep a tight rein on yourself for a minute. We'll see this thing through." Heron opened the door a few inches and said, "Jackson, I've got no intention of butting my head against the towering wall of the law. But before I turn this boy over to anybody, I want to see that court order with my own eyes." Jan heard a muttered conversation beyond the door, and the doctor was handed a piece of paper. The doctor squinted at it through his glasses and grunted. "So, signed by that fellow Roundtree? Says I'm to turn over constituted authority. Says I'm to turn over to constituted authority. That can't be you, Sergeant Bricker, because you have no authority beyond the city limits, which doesn't quite extend to my stone wall. Anyway, it says I'm to turn over the person of one Bryce Riggs, criminally insane, an escapee from Marysville." Heron Rhodes passed the paper to a heavy square figure that Jan glimpsed through the partially open door. "Jackson, you tell that bunch out there that the court order doesn't apply. First, there's no one in this house named Bryce Riggs. Second, no one in this house is insane, criminally or otherwise. I should know." The doctor paused and peered at the assembly outside, scowling. "Jackson, I smell an enormous rat here. It stinks to heaven. You tell that bunch to get off my property, or I'm calling the sheriff. In the meantime, I'm calling Marysville and getting the straight of this. Jan could hear quick voices outside, followed by the deep voice of Jackson Lane raised in protest. Abruptly, the door was pushed open. Heron Rhodes was thrust aside, and men invaded the hall. The move was so unexpected that Jan stood frozen for an instant, and then he leaped away from a bulky figure in a white jacket and tried to dodge another coming at him from the side. His dodging served only to place him within range of Sergeant Bricker's powerful arms. Accidentally turned the page. The instant Bricker caught him, Jan went wild. In an explosion of fury, he kicked, scratched, bit, and used thumbs, fists, and elbows with such an unexpected force and speed that Bricker was thrown off balance and fell. Jan squirmed eel-like out of the other's grip, but in the next breath was caught in a more expert fashion by a guard in a white jacket. He promptly gave the guard a bad time, for the fellow cried out, "Quick, George, use the hypo. The kid's gone nuts." "No, you don't," Heron Rhodes shouted. "Don't you touch that boy with the needle." Jan, panting with exertion, glimpsed the other guard moving swiftly upon him with an outstretched hypodermic needle. While he fought to avoid it, he watched with the sort of horror Let's take a moment here. This is one thing. Oh, sorry, I just saw a notice here. Poor gnome. Sounds like no one's having a good day. Anyways, I was taking a moment here. This is one thing that I did remember about this is that Jan's fear of needles is extreme. Not so much the needles, but what they represent. And as part of that, there is a lot of detailed description of needles and attempting to inject people and what the needles look like. We're going to get into a little bit of that here, just as a bit of warning for, let's see. Looks like right now it's only about a paragraph or two. Um, so if you need to step aside, go ahead. As I take care of this. As I get the right keyboard to take care of that. Just some troublemakers. Anyway, okay. Oh. And some other folks in here. Um, just as a quick recap. So Jan is a boy who found himself on a train with no memory, no idea where he's going, and basically a young girl about his age rescued him and repeatedly attempted to rescue him, and then eventually found him after he tried to run away from the police and got trapped in the rain, and is now among a family with some oddities about them. Every time we try to get into what that is, there's interruptions, but Ginny has some type of telepathic powers. Her eyes are very photosensitive, but has possibly some type of extra spectrum vision based on that. And the police say his name is something else, and they're trying to arrest him. And other things. Don't you touch that boy with the needle. Jan, panting with exertion, glimpsed the other guard moving swiftly upon him with an outstretched hypodermic needle. While he fought to avoid it, he watched with a sort of horror as the point of the needle went quickly toward his shoulder. With all the power of his mind, he tried to stop it. Miraculously, it did stop. Then he gasped and momently forgot to fight as the hypodermic suddenly shattered into 1,000 pieces. The guard cursed, but instantly took advantage of the incident to shove Heron Rhodes and Jackson Lane aside and seize Jan around the legs. With Sergeant Bricker helping, the three men hurriedly took their squirming prisoner outside and heaved him headfirst into the back of the van. Before Jan could move, the door was slammed shut and locked. Seconds later, he heard the abrupt roar of the motor and felt the twisting movement as the vehicle shot swaying down the lane. It was some time before he got his breath and was able to sit up. Only now did he discover that the van was padded inside, which alone had saved him from being badly bruised when he was thrown into it. As he looked around the padded interior, his early fury was replaced by a black foreboding. This van, obviously, was specially made for transporting violent people. He swallowed at the thought. Was he really insane, as the police and guards certainly believed? And had he actually killed 7 people? "No!" he cried, springing up with returning fury and hurling himself like a caged young panther against the door. "No, it's a rotten lie, and Dr. Rhodes knows it." "Take it easy, kid," came a voice from the front. "You can't get out. The strongest guy in the world couldn't." Jan whirled and glared at the impassive face of the guard named George. peering at him through the upper part of the partition, which was covered with heavy steel wire. "Where are you taking me?" he demanded. "You ought to know. You've been there before." Jan sunk down again, his foreboding returning. Suddenly he remembered the particular thing that happened to the hypodermic needle. Had he actually managed to stop it? Certainly he hadn't caused it to go to pieces. Then he realized the guards were also wondering about it, for he could hear them discussing it. Right in my hand it did that," said the heavy-faced George. "First it stopped. I couldn't move it. Then it exploded. Only it wasn't exactly an explosion. It just went poof! Right in my hand. Yeah." "I know there's something mighty funny queer about it," replied the other, who was driving. "But with that wildcat back there to hang onto. Say, you don't reckon that kid himself caused it, do you?" "Don't know." "I'd say he's got a real twist to him, besides being a killer. Anyway, he's Big Doc's prize, so we'd better report what happened to the needle." Big Doc's prize, was he? Jan ground his teeth and tried to project his mind forward to what ought to be a familiar destination, but it was like plunging into a seething blackness. He recoiled, sought a better mental route to travel. But before he could find one to his liking, he heard George mutter, "Harry, I think we got a tail. Watch that second car behind us, the little blue one." "You could be right. Turn off the next road, then come back. If he stays with us." The van turned, traveled a short distance, and backed into a dirt road and waited. Jan peered curiously through the partition and glimpsed a small blue car go past the intersection. When it was out of sight, the van returned to its former route on the highway. Presently, George said, "Here he comes. They're staying farther back now. Tell me, who'd want to tail us?" "Not the cops," Harry growled. "Big Doc's got 'em in his pocket. Has to be some snoop in the pay of that Rhodes guy. He's got a kind of doc himself. He's a kind of doc himself. He sure is latched onto that kid. Big Doc wouldn't like that." "We'll have to ditch him. Still, if he's got our tag number." "Won't help him. I changed tags before we left the center. Big Doc says not to take any chances. And they won't learn anything at Marysville. Big Doc has all the records. I'm turning at that road ahead. Hang on." Jan was thrown violently from side to side as the van abruptly left the highway and went careening at high speed along a winding country road. Unconsciously, as the van's course became more erratic and his fear of what lay ahead increased, he began playing a mental game he must have played many times in the past. It was born of a wish to be somewhere else, and the game's success depended upon the reality of the reality of the vision he could bring to his mind. At that moment, more than anything else on earth, he wanted to be back in the pleasant safety of Heron Road's library. He closed his eyes, saw the blue-carpeted room with enticing clearness, and fervently wished himself there. Something seemed to whirl in his head. Then came a sharp sound and the sort of snap of air being displaced, and instantly the van's wild motion ceased. The rough texture of the padding beneath him now had the softness of a thick Chinese carpet. Almost in fear, Jan opened his eyes. He was back where he wanted to be. Heron Rhodes and Hecuba and Otis and Jackson Lane were all staring at him in astonishment. Ginny alone was smiling. "I knew it," she cried, clapping her hands. "I knew it." First time I read this, I utterly fell in love with that ability. I've also taken note over the years of times when I've felt that safeness. That, and not just, oh, this is a safe place. That utter, this place is completely safe. And it's never been something about this idea kind of locked that into my mind of just something to remember these times. I'm sure there's part of me that would love the ability to like teleport back to them, but the idea of that safeness doesn't come from the place. It comes from the people around me. And something I've always appreciated, being able to hold on to those moments. Some of you might know what I'm talking about. Heron Rhodes said softly, "Great galloping Caesar's ghost. No wonder they want him." "Of course," said Hecuba with equal softness. "And there are certain groups on our planet who'd pay anything to have him, if they could control him." "Yes," Heron agreed. "You've put your finger directly on it." Jackson Lane had heaved his short, square bulk from the chair while he gaped at Jan. His mouth worked soundlessly for a moment, then he blurted in his deep voice, How in the name of heaven did you get here?" "He teleported," little Otis said loftily. "Nonsense," rumbled the lawyer. "I don't believe in such things." "Seeing should be believing, Jackson," Heron Rhodes put it quietly. "I've seen you and Hecuba do lots of things these past 50 years I didn't believe in," Jackson Lane muttered. "Naturally, I've kept my mouth shut, but I still remember those blackbirds you used to point your finger at when we were kids. You'd say, 'Pow,' and they'd drop over dead." "I've always been sorry about those birds," the doctor admitted. "But it's the eye that does that, not the finger. In the Middle Ages, I've been burned." He stopped abruptly, then said, "Jan, I destroyed the hypodermic, but I didn't stop it. The only person who could have done that is you." "Me?" Jan repeated. He was still in a state of semi-shock over what he had accomplished. "Yes, you. Why, that fellow couldn't move his hand. I was tempted to use my little weapon on him and his friend, but happily I didn't. It has a devastating effect on humans unless one's very careful, and things were happening much too fast. Anyway, Ginny was right about you. You have 2 talents, which makes you a very special person. I might say 3, the way you fought those rascals. You really put up a fight." Chuckling, Heron came over and helped Jan to his feet. "Son, I can't wait to hear what happened in the van. I want you to tell us—" "Not now," Hecuba interrupted. "Poor boy hasn't had a bite since last night, and here it is the afternoon. I'll tell the cook." "No," Heron said quickly. "Just have her put snacks on the table for all of us, then send her home. Not a soul must know Jan is here. After we've eaten, we'll have to hide him, or at least keep him out of sight when someone comes. I don't want a word about him to get out to anyone. The help here, those on your staff, Jackson, except possibly Bill Zorn." Why Bill?" Jackson Lane asked as Hecuba left the room. "Because he's already on the case. Hecuba and I had a hunch something like this would happen today, so I had Bill come before you got here and wait across the road in his car. He was to follow the white van. I'm certain it didn't come from Marysville." Jan said, "Does Bill Zorn drive a small blue car?" "Yes, why?" "Because somebody in a small blue car did follow the van, but those guards spotted him. They were trying to get away from him when I left." If they spotted him, said the lawyer, then they probably got away. Bill's a top investigator, but trailing cars isn't his strong point. I'm sure he took their license number, but I doubt it would help. I doubt that would help us. It wouldn't, Jan told him. They switched plates. I heard them talking about it. What else did you hear? A few too many changes there. What else did you hear? Heron Rhodes said eagerly. They were taking me to what they called the center. It seems I escaped from there. Did you get any idea of its location? No, sir, but somebody called Big Doc is in charge. Hecuba returned and said, Not another word till he eats. The snacks are ready, and the cook's gone. As they filled into the beamed kitchen with its big round table, Jan heard Heron Rhodes mutter, Big Doc. Big Doc. Never heard anyone called that, but somehow it strikes a bell. Makes me very uneasy. Why, Pops? Said Ginny. Blessed if I know, Pet, but this thing's bigger than I thought. A lot bigger. Pops, if those people find out Jan's back here with us, what do you think they'll do? They'll try and kidnap him, but they'll make sure he's drugged so he can't get away. Chapter 6. Hiding. So Hecuba has a vague power of uncontrolled seeing into the future. Heron can explode things by looking at them. Ginny can read minds. Also, read you yourself. Like she was able to tell Jan's name when Jan couldn't remember it. Otis can find things. And Jan can teleport and make people freeze. Chapter 6. Hiding. They had finished eating and were going over the details of Jan's account for the third time when Otis slid off his chair and started out of the room. Hecuba Rhodes said, What is it, Otis? Bill's coming, said the small boy. Gonna let him in. Jackson Lane looked blankly around the table. How the dickens does that little fellow know someone's outside? He just knows, said Ginny. And he can find people, Jan put in. He found me last night after I'd run away from the train. I was hiding in a shed way over on the other side of town. The lawyer frowned, then creases in his square face deepened. I don't believe in this sort of thing, he rumbled. Never did, in spite of what I've seen. But why couldn't Otis help us locate the center where Jan was being taken? Oh, I'm sure he could find it in time, Heron Rhodes answered, but it might have taken months. You see, the boy's range is only about a mile. Last night we had to circle around half of Westlake before Otis picked up the scent, if you want to call it that. Pops, said Ginny, what makes you think this thing about Jan is so much bigger? They were interrupted by Otis coming back into the room with a pale, studious-looking young man in tow. The young man nodded politely to those at the table, then shook his head at Heron Rhodes. Sorry, sir. I did my best, but I goofed it. They got away. Never mind, Bill, Jackson Lane told him. Their victim, escaped. He motioned to Jan. But here he is, back with us. Bill Zorn blinked at Jan. But this is impossible, sir. As soon as I lost them, I drove back here as fast as I could. How? He used a different route, small Otis said, with a perfectly straight face. And quite speedy. It's rather involved, Heron Rhodes added quickly, so I'll explain it to you later. Right now, Bill, we need answers to some questions, and we need them fast. Pour yourself a cup of coffee and draw up a chair. And Bill, cautioned the lawyer, not a word about Jan to anyone, not even Millie. No one is to know he's here. Understand? Of course, sir. Bill Zorn looked curiously at Jan, shook his head, and then poured his coffee and sat down. If he's kept hidden here, do you think he'll be safe? No, Heron Rhodes said shortly. He's much too valuable to someone. I expect, Jackson, you better hire guards. We should have at least 2 around the clock. They can bunk over at the guest house behind the lab. Okay. What do you want me to tell them? Don't mention Jan. Just say I've become concerned about my grandchildren, Ginny and Otis, and think it's time they've had some protection. And it is time, dag burn it. I'd almost forgotten what a devilishly wicked world we're living in. Heron turned and scowled at Bill Zorn. Haven't you got a fingerprinting outfit? Sure, it's in the car. Then get it and take Jan's prints. I want you to hightail over to Marysville with them. Check them with the prints of someone named Bryce Riggs. That's the name given on the court order that Bricker had. But Doctor, Jan interrupted, those guards said... That big doc had all the records. I know. The fingerprints are different. I don't know how Marysville handles their cases, but the criminally insane are often fingerprinted by the receiving officer for later identification in case of trouble or death. See what I'm driving at? Of course. But what if Jan's prints match the Riggs prints, if they have them? It'll only prove the switch was made somewhere else. Jan is not Bryce Riggs. To find out who he really is, you may have to trace Bryce Riggs and learn if there really was such a person, and what happened to him. And while you're searching, keep tuned to these leads. Jan was being taken to a place the guards called the Center, run by someone they spoke of as Big Doc. Now hurry and take those prints, then get going. The fingerprinting was done in short order. When finished, Bill Zorn placed them in his case and started away. But at the door he stopped abruptly. There's one thing that bugs me. Why would anyone go to the trouble and expense of trying to make one boy pass for another, then tag him as a dangerous criminal? Heron Rhodes said, Quite simple, Bill. Before they took Jan away, you were watching the house and the van through your glasses. You bet I was. What time did they take Jan out of the house and drive away with him? About 10 after 12. What time was it when you lost sight of them and gave up the chase? I'd say around 20 to 1. Bill, Jan was back here before 20 to 1. How do you suppose he managed to do that? Bill Zorn stiffened. His mouth came open. But, good Lord, that's impossible. Unless what? Unless teleportation is a fact. With Jan, it is a fact. And the people who can control Jan, make him do their bidding, can become very powerful indeed. You see, it's rather frightening to realize what we might be up against. Heron shook his head. On your way, Bill. I want some answers. Jan was given the bedroom off the library for his own, and told to remain in it and keep the door locked when the servants were about their morning duties. Not that our help can't be trusted, Hecuba Rhodes told him. They certainly can. They're all members of the Angus McCoy family. Angus runs the farm, and he's been here 20 years. But so long as they don't know you are here, they'll act normally and give the right answers as strangers ask questions. Then Hecuba added thoughtfully, Now, tomorrow's Sunday, so only the cook will be here. That's Aggie, Angus's sister. And she'll finish up before 10 and leave for the day. So the coast will be clear until Monday morning, when Tilly McCoy vacuums downstairs. I hope Ginny's practicing. Ginny said, I always practice in the library in the morning, and I guess I do make a lot of racket. But if... Don't stop because of me, Jan said quickly, remembering how she loved her music. I sort of like the piano. He was rewarded by a grateful smile that vanished on the instant when Hecuba said, I do think, my dear, that you ought to cancel your lessons in Glendale till we can get Jan out of danger. I never did like the thought of you going over there alone. Oh no, Jenny wailed. We're just getting into Spanish music, and if you only knew how much I... She stopped abruptly. I'm sorry, she went on apologetically. I'm just being selfish. If staying home will help Jan, of course I'll stay. Do you really think I feel I should, Aunt Heck? I honestly don't know how I feel, Hecuba admitted, with an uncertain shake of her white head. I wish to heaven I did. I'm very uneasy. I know something's going to happen. In fact, something's bound to happen. For it won't take this big doc creature, whoever he is, very long to decide Jan must have come back here. But what will he do? Somehow I can't put my finger on it. She shook her head again and looked at Ginny. I suppose you might as well continue with your lessons. But don't go alone. If we can't get guards enough to spare, I'll arrange to have Agnes drive you over and bring you back. Jan fell asleep wondering what Big Doc was like, and awoke to the sound of the piano being played softly but beautifully. He splashed water in his face in the low bedroom, dressed quickly, and quietly opened the door to the library. For a few seconds he stood motionless, watching Ginny's small fingers racing over the keys. The song was hauntingly familiar, and unconsciously he began humming the tune. Suddenly, her fingers stopped and she turned toward him. Morning. You know what I was playing? He nodded. Sorry, I'm working on my Spanish here. He nodded. La Golondrina. Lightly he sang a few measures. I'm not going to subject you to that. Her mouth came open, and for a moment she seemed to be studying him curiously behind dark glasses. Almost in a whisper, she asked, Jan, who taught you that? My mother. What was she like? She... He closed his eyes and clenched his fists in the effort to recall the vague and momentary vision that had come to him, but it was gone. Helplessly, he shook his head. I just love the music, but what's Golondrina mean? Swallow. The song tells how in April... Jan! Don't you realize your mother must have been Spanish? Maybe so, he shrugged. What of it? What of it? She exclaimed. My goodness, it's a clue. You're beginning to remember. If you can just... She stopped abruptly as if listening, and her mouth worked soundlessly. What's the matter? I was just talking to Otis. He says the coast is clear and you can come and have breakfast with us. You were talking to Otis? But how? Oh, just sort of mentally, she said lightly. We've always been able to do it. But great Jupiter, that's amazing. She giggled. Not a tenth as amazing as being able to teleport. Oh, Otis says Bill and Mr. Jackson Lane are here. She hurried and opened the front door just as the chimes rang, admitting a frowning lawyer and a very tired Bill Zorn. Aaron Rhodes met them and ushered them through the house to the big round table in the kitchen. Bill just got in, Jackson Lane rumbled. He didn't learn much. I'm afraid Saturday wasn't the best day to go to Marysville. No day's a good day to go there, Aaron Rhodes said grimly. Hecuba and I have tried bringing reforms, but when you have to deal with some of these unhallowed politicians... He shook his head and asked, What did you pick up, Bill? Nothing but Bryce Riggs, sir. Not a thing. And I got my nose into every file there. You'd almost think Bryce Riggs never existed. Existed somewhere. Odd job's to find out where. Go on, Bill. Bill Zorn rubbed his tired eyes and drank some of the coffee Hecuba poured for him. Well, I did learn that Marysville is sort of a clearinghouse for unusual cases. Unofficially, that is. I mean, they're so crowded that they're glad to let private institutions, qualified ones who are doing research, borrow patients to study. I know that, Aaron Rhodes told him. We've borrowed an occasional patient from them ourselves. Every which one we've helped. Did you get a list of the other borrowers? Sure did. Bill Zorn produced a small notebook, opened it, and slid it across the table. The doctor adjusted his glasses and scowled at it. I know all these places, most of the people that run them. The one place I have my doubts about, the Orchard Nursing Home, isn't even on your list. But Pine Ridge Sanitarium is. And that's the most exclusive and expensive private asylum in this part of the country. I can't imagine any hanky-panky going on there. Are you sure there are no other doctors like myself? Private doctors, I mean, who could be borrowing patients? I thought of that, Bill Zorn said, and I'm having a friend of mine check into it. That's Joe Hinkle, who used to be on my basketball team in high school. I didn't know he was working at Marysville, but when I found him over in the bookkeeping department... He's okay, and I told him just enough to get him anxious to help. So if there's anything to be found, Joe'll dig it up. Excuse me, said Jan, breaking in, but what about Big Doc and the center? Did you happen to... Oh, I told Joe about that, Bill Zorn replied. The only center he could think of is the geriatric center next to the Glendale Hospital. But that's for the elderly. Anyway, the van was heading away from Glendale when I followed it. As for Big Doc, he's going to keep his ears open. Aaron Rhodes gave a nod of approval. Let's pray he hears something soon. He glanced at the lawyer. What about those guards, Jackson? Could you find any? Aaron, I could locate only 2 at the moment. They're retired policemen, and they promised to be here by 6 this evening. Guards, trustworthy ones, are hard to find right now. I hope to have some more by Wednesday. Oh, you've got to, Hecuba urged. I've got the most awful feeling about what lies ahead. Stop worrying, my dear, the lawyer rumbled. We'll get this cleared up soon. Yesterday, right after I left here, I went to see Roundtree. That scuttling old turtle, Heron growled. Judas would have made a better judge. Probably, Jackson Lane agreed. Anyway, I went down to track down the authority that pressured him into issuing that court order for Jan. He swore it came direct from the superintendent's office at Marysville. Maybe it did, but I told him we'd checked with Marysville, and no one knew anything about escapee named Bryce Riggs. And further, I told him that this whole thing was beginning to look like a conspiracy, and that we might have to call in the FBI. That shook him up a bit. Then I went round to have a talk with that Sergeant Bricker. Eh? Aaron Rhodes stared at him. What the dingle tarnation did you go see him about? Sort of thought we could get his help. His help? While that self-righteous rascal... Easy, Heron. The lawyer gave a deep chuckle. We need his help. I figured he'd be only too glad to give it when I told him a few facts. I soon had him crawling when I pointed out that Marysville knew nothing about Bryce Riggs, and he made a illegal entry here yesterday, and had so aided and abetted a very serious crime. It could cost him his job. So he's working for us now. Doing what? As acting chief of police, the lawyer explained. He's got all the facilities of the department at his fingertips. He can talk directly to any police department in the country and get any information they happen to have. Since only state residents are admitted to Marysville, it shouldn't take him long to dig up something about Bryce Riggs. Same goes for Jan's fingerprints. Well, I hadn't heard, said Heron. I hadn't thought of that. Maybe we can get somewhere now. And then his long fingers began to drum upon the tabletop, and he shook his head. I just wish I could remember why that name, Big Doc, seems to strike a bell. It worries me. Yeah, I can get through a few more pages here before a break. Big Doc loomed in Jan's tortured dreaming that night as a great dark hairy ogre with pudgy fingers and a soft but frightening voice. He woke trembling and heard the tall clock in the library ponderously strike 4 times. He sat up, his fist knotted into the sheets, knowing that somehow the dream version of Big Doc must be close to reality. Hate rose in him. Big Doc was a thief who had destroyed whatever he had been and stolen his memory. Hate boiled above his fear and washed away what remained of the night, so it was almost daylight before he fell asleep again. He was awakened finally by the unaccustomed sound of the vacuum cleaner that Tilly McCoy, the maid, was using in the hall. Somehow, with the help of books Ginny selected for him in the library, he got through the long day. Tuesday was much the same. If he could have been free to go outside and explore the farm, the waiting would have been easier. But he was practically a prisoner in his own room, always forced to flee to it and lock the door to avoid being seen by a chance visitor or one of the servants. As Hecuba Rhodes said... As the hours dragged, his uneasiness increased. As Hecuba Rhodes had said, something was bound to happen. But what? Several times he crouched by his window, peering carefully through the curtains at the courtyard behind the house. On one side was a stone addition that he judged was the research lab, while facing it across the walls and the flower garden was the garage. The building at the far end, he decided, had to be the guest houses. Through the trees he could glimpse barns and other stone structures in the distance. It was not hard to guess who the people were that occasionally crossed the courtyard. The aproned woman who usually appeared in the middle of the afternoon had to be Angus the cook. Angus McCoy's sister. Agnes the cook, sorry. Angus McCoy's sister, while the younger one was probably Tilly, his daughter. The short, sturdy, bow-legged man, who twice came to talk to Heron Rhodes, was no doubt Angus himself. A second man dressed in workman's clothes, who puttered watchfully about patching the stonework, must be one of the guards who had come Sunday evening. Jan wondered about the extra guards that Jackson Lane had been trying to get. So far, they hadn't arrived. They had not arrived by Wednesday afternoon, when Ginny left for her music lesson. From his window, Jan watched her small, slender figure move lightly across the courtyard beside the sturdy bulk of Angus, who was driving her to Glendale in Hecuba's station wagon. Only her white cane and dark glasses gave any indication of her blindness, and again he wondered by what magic she could make it out in the world, and how strange it must appear to her. It was when the station wagon was gone that a sudden, deeper uneasiness came over him. Hecuba had been worried about the lack of guards, but having extra guards didn't really matter. What mattered was something else, something they'd overlooked. What could it be? About to sneeze. Let's see. What mattered was something else, something that they'd overlooked. What could it be? He tried to shake off the feeling, but it clung to him and grew worse with the evening. In the library, while they were waiting for Ginny's return, he caught Heron Rhodes studying him with some concern. Heron told him, don't let Big Doc get you down, son. We'll settle with him soon. My word on it." He shook his head. It's not what you think," he managed to say. "I mean, well, I have an awful feeling we've missed something. It's kind of like a chess move that could get you checkmated." Heron's eyes sharpened on him. "Evidently you know how to play chess. Now think, son, what sort of move would it be?" "Sort of a round-the-corner move, like you do with a knight. It has to do with Jenny." Hecuba gasped. "Jenny? Oh, my heavens! Otis, call your sister. See if she can..." "Oh, she's okay," Otis said with mild disgust. "I've been talking with her right along. She just left and she's going over now to get in the car." He glanced at Jan and said aloofly, "If you're so smart, see if you can beat me at a game of chess." Without waiting for a reply, he trotted over to a gaming table beyond the piano and took a box of chessmen from the drawer. Otis was about to dump them on the table when the small body stiffened and his owlish eyes became great marbles of fear. "No!" he gasped. "No, no!" The chessman dropped from his nerveless hands and spilled upon the carpet. Suddenly he ran to Hecuba and clasped her tightly, sobbing. "They got her! Men in the car! I can't hear her, Aunt Heck! They got her!" Heron Rhodes shook his head once, then sprang to his feet and snatched up the phone on the desk. His fingers spun the dial once more. "Operator," he barked. "Quick, this is emergency. Get me the Glendale police." And before continuing to Chapter 7, we're going to take a bit of a break. See you in a bit.
filter out all the noise? Or have you lost track? At the end of the show, there's just one way to go. You can run till your body's tired. You can try any door in town, but your freedom is not outside you. Oh, now the only way out is way down, way down. Take the masks and the ropes, sit 'em down for a spell. Such a heavy load starts to crack your shell, and it just gets harder to maintain the line until you drop that curtain you've been hiding behind. What do you think they'll see? Who were you scared to be? You can run till your body's tired. You can try any door in town, but your freedom is not outside you. Oh, now you'll just run till your body's tired, and you'll try any door in town, but until you look right inside you, oh, now the only way out is way down, way down, way down, way Don't want your worship, honey. Got me too far off the ground. When I jump from this pedestal, Lord knows it's a long way down. Need someone who wants to see me in the day and in the dark. Sit and take shots with my demons, photograph my battle scars. Can you call me by my name? Can you step into this flame? Can you taste the fire on my lips? Baby, can you burn with them? Can you taste the fire on my lips? Baby, can you burn with them? Burn with it. Sometimes you get so shaky, makes your hands real hard to hold. I can feel your spirit aching, and your warm heart seems so cold. I can love you when laughter and the cry. When it's more than you can take, when the dam's about to break, can you taste the fire on my lips? Baby, can you burn me there? Can you taste the fire on my lips? Baby, you can burn me
I do apologize for that. I just saw the mute light flashing. Just looking at what time I've got here. Picking up where we left off. Chapter 7. Hostage. The tall clock in the library struck a deep and somehow doomful note. Then it slowly struck another, and another, and another. Jan counted the strikes without realizing what he was doing. 10 o'clock. 4 hours had passed since Jenny had been kidnapped. He chewed on his lip and looked over again at Otis, who was huddled miserably in the recesses of one of the big leather chairs. Heron Rhodes, grimly pacing the floor in front of him, stopped and looked also, silently asking the question they had been asking for hours. The small boy shook his head. Heron muttered, "We won't hear from her till the drugs wear off. They must have given her as big of a dose as they gave Angus. The stupid fools. Half would have been more than enough." The Glendale police had found the Rhodes station wagon on the edge of town, with Angus, drugged and suffering from a blow on the head, lying on the floor behind the driver's seat. Angus, Jan had been told, had no idea what had happened. The farm manager had gained consciousness hardly an hour ago, and was able to say only that somebody had called to him by name from a passing car, and when he had turned to see who had spoken, he was suddenly struck from behind. All of this seemed rather odd to Jan. How could Big Doc have known about Angus, or that Angus would drive Ginny to Glendale on Tuesday? Unless, of course, Big Doc had become familiar with the establishment of Heron Rhodes long before that chance meeting with Ginny on the train last Friday. But why would Big Doc ever have any interest in Heron Rhodes? Somehow it didn't make sense. Unless... Jan shook his head and looked across the room at the desk where Jackson Lane and Bill Zorn were waiting for the first message from Big Doc. They had come immediately when Heron called, and were followed quickly by Sergeant Bricker, who had brought a recording apparatus to attach to the phone. In their concern for Ginny, seemed no one had thought to tell Bricker about his return. At the sight of him, the sergeant, after a shocked stare on entering, had demanded, How the devil did you manage to get away from those people and come back here?" "I just managed," he told Bricker, and Heron Rhodes added, "For safety's sake, we thought we'd better keep it quiet. And please, Sergeant, we want to keep this quiet, too. Don't let it get out to the papers." "You have my word on it, Doctor. I'll do everything I can to make up for my blunder. Now all we need is a yard full of reporters to follow things up." Bricker frowned and said, There almost has to be a connection between what happened to this young fellow and Ginny being snatched, don't you think? Don't you think so?" "It would appear that way, Sergeant, but so far we hadn't heard a word from the kidnappers." "Well, I'm sure you will soon. I'll fix the phone, then I'll have to hurry back to meet Nat Martin. He's on his way from the city now. Did Mr. Lane tell you about him?" "Something was said about a state bureau man you may know. Mr. Lane figured we'd better call him in. It'll be unofficial. Martin's the best there is. Used to be with the FBI, and they still consult him." Bricker made speedy work of attaching the recorder. On the way out he paused uncertainly and said, "I'm sorry, young fellow, about turning you over to those guys the other day, but honestly, I thought—" "It's all right. It's all right, Sergeant," he told Bricker. "A man has to do what he believes is his duty." Bricker, obviously grateful, had a sudden grin and gave him a pat on the back. "Boy, did you put up a scrap." That had been 2 hours ago. The matronly cook, Angus McCoy's sister Aggie, came in with a large tray of sandwiches and snacks she had placed on a table beside a stack of paper cups and plates. Behind her appeared Hecuba with a fresh pot of coffee. Hecuba, whose eyes were looking haunted, said, "Thank you for helping, Aggie. This may be an all-night session, so maybe you better go home and look after Agnes." "That I will, ma'am. Though it's not Angus that worries me." The cook shook her head, dabbed at her eye with the corner of her apron, and stared away after giving Jan a quick sidelong glance full of curiosity. "You may need me later, ma'am. You just call on me, and I'll be right over." "Thank you so much, Aggie." Hecuba went around and touched Otis on the cheek. "Young man, it's long past your bedtime." Otis thrust out his jaw. "I ain't going to bed. I ain't going no place till I hear from Ginny." Heron Rhodes said, "Oh, leave him be. We may need him." "Of course," Hecuba murmured. "I sometimes forget those two are telepaths. They're so quiet about it." Heron sank down on the sofa beside Jan. He rubbed his eyes and muttered, "You handled Becker just right, son. He's not a bad sort, but it wouldn't do for him to know too much about us." He was silent for a while. Then his hands clenched and he said slowly, "You see what's coming, don't you?" Jan nodded. I see it. Ginny is just a hostage. They'll use her to get me back." Heron nodded. "It has to be that." "Well, I'm ready to be traded. Any time." He tried to make his voice sound confident, but it was far from the way he felt. "You're very brave, son." "I'm not brave, but I have to do it. There's no other way to get Ginny back." But even if we make the trade, they might not return Ginny. Have you thought of that?" "Yes, sir. I've been thinking of it. I've a feeling that once Big Doc, whoever he is, gets his hands on me, he'll try to keep both of us." "What makes you feel that way?" Jan chewed on his lip a moment. "Well, it's several things. If they believed Ginny was really blind and couldn't see anything, why did they bother to drug her?" Heron looked startled. "Go on, son." "And then there's Angus. There's no reason why they should even know him, especially if they're interested only in me. But they knew him. They even called to him by name. And, well, how could they possibly have learned ahead of time that he was going to drive Ginny to Glendale today? She usually takes the train. Anyway, if the extra guards had come, they would have driven her." "I see." "So, well, it sort of looks like Big Doc knew a lot about the Rhodes family before I ever came here." "Good Lord, I hope to heaven you're wrong." "I sure hope I am too. When you think about it, Ginny would be just as valuable to Big Doc as I am. I mean, what she can do is amazing. If he found out about her and figured she knows how to control her." "God forbid. But first he'd have to learn the truth about her. And I don't see how anyone could have managed it. You're the only person besides the family who knows." "Doesn't Mr. Lane know?" Jan asked, nodding across the big room towards the lawyer and Bill Zorn in deep discussion near the recorder. "He knows about you and your sister." "He doesn't know everything about us," the doctor said quietly. "Jackson and I grew up together, and he realized early what he'd learned about us had better remain a secret. Even his wife doesn't know. As for Ginny, he may suspect she has odd abilities simply because she's a member of an odd family. But I doubt if he knows the truth, and I'm certain he'd never allow himself to mention a word about any of us to a soul." Heron Rhodes paused. He was grimly silent for a moment. "Of course," he went on finally, "it's possible that Big Doc knows far more about us than I've suspected. I overlook the fact that certain countries are spending huge sums to investigate and develop people like us. We'd be worth billions to them in a time of war. And that big doc could be over here on a search for talent. In that case, I'd be high on his list as a possible source of material. The European medical fraternity certainly knew of my interest in unusual methods. We could have been watched for months. Sorry, my voice is really flagging here. Not so much my voice, just keeping up some of these voices. Let's see. Maybe that's it, Jan said, though he was far from convinced, in spite of the doctor's logic. Heron Rhodes sighed like a man in pain. I don't know, son. I just don't know. It's hard to think right now. I'd rather be dead than lose Ginny. Jan swallowed. In the short time he'd known Ginny, she'd come to mean more to him than he would ever thought possible. You're not going to lose her, he managed to say. I wish I could believe you, the doctor muttered, but something tells me exchanging you for her isn't going to work. Hecuba, restlessly pacing the library, paused before the sofa. What isn't going to work, Heron? Exchanging Jan for Ginny, the doctor told her. I'm sure he'll keep them both. She nodded. I feel that too. So the smart thing, I believe, would be for us to hang on to Jan and refuse to make an exchange. That would give us time to locate Ginny. If we put our heads together, surely we can think of something. No, Jan protested, springing suddenly to his feet. No, that's the worst thing to do. If you refuse to exchange me, you'll never see Ginny again. They'll take her out of the country and come after me later. Can't you understand? He stopped, looking from Hecuba to her brother, then at Jackson Lane, who had crossed the library and was standing scowling at them. What's all the fuss? The lawyer rumbled. Heron Rhodes told him. The burly lawyer shook his head. Now just simmer down, he ordered. You're way ahead of yourselves. We don't even know for sure who took Ginny. It could just be a straight kidnapping and have nothing at all to do with Jan. Don't forget, Heron, you're not known as a poor man. Now, until we hear from the people who took Ginny, there's nothing to do but wait. And after we hear, we'll let Nat Martin make the decisions. He frowned at his wristwatch. He ought to be here any time now. Heron Rhodes grunted. He tapped his fingers on his knees, then patiently heaved his lean form from his feet and began pacing the library. Presently he returned and was about to sit down again when a small sound from Otis caused him to straighten. Jan, still standing, looked quickly at Otis. The little boy was sitting up in his chair, eyes wide, staring into space while his mouth worked soundlessly. Otis suddenly whispered, She's awake. She's sort of sick, and I can't talk to her very well. The abrupt ringing of the telephone cut Otis short. It was not a shrill sound, but in the immediate stark silence of the library, it sounded shrill and terribly demanding. Heron raced towards it. Just before he reached it, Bill Zorn said quickly, Remember, it's connected to an office speaker as well as a recorder. The doctor grunted and snatched up the receiver. Yes, he said, like a man holding his breath. From the speaker, a rough voice ordered, Let me talk to Johnny. Eh? Johnny who? Ain't this Johnny's Pizza Hut? No, snarled Heron and slammed the receiver down. The doctor turned away, muttering to himself. Almost on instant, the phone rang again. He whirled and caught up the receiver a second time. Yes? Dr. Rhodes. This is Heron Rhodes. We have Ginny. Now listen carefully. I'm listening. The voice that came from the speaker had a slightly foreign accent. It was hard to tell whether it was a man or a woman's. This is the only call we will make to you, Doctor. It is coming from a pay station, so you can forget about tracing it. If you want Ginny back, you must leave the police entirely out of this. Act immediately and do exactly as you are told. If you fail to do so, you will never see her again. Is that perfectly clear? I understand you, Heron growled. What's your deal? Get into your white rolls with the Riggs boy. What in triple tarnation are you talking about? Heron interrupted. I haven't had anyone here named Riggs. Don't be a fool, Doctor, the voice said coldly. The boy under discussion is with you now. Don't waste time denying it. Take him to the Midway Plaza shopping center on the Glendale Highway and drop him off at the southwest corner by the theater. He is to be in the phone booth next to the theater by exactly 11 o'clock to receive a call. Have you got it? I've got it, blast you. But what about Ginny? You'll be told where to find her in the morning. The plaza is a 20-minute drive from your house, so you better start immediately. When you have dropped the boy at the theater, you are to drive onto the northwest corner of the parking lot and wait under the last light for a half hour. Don't leave before then, and don't make the mistake of bringing another person with you. There was a click as the caller hung up. For seconds after the connection had been broken, Heron stood clutching the receiver, his face white and drawn, his free hand clenched. He seemed caught between fear and explosive fury. And slowly he replaced the receiver, and his haunted eyes stabbed around the room. What in God's name am I to do? He asked bleakly. Take me to the plaza, Jan cried instantly. Can't you see? It's our only chance. Heron turned and tried to speak, but before words could form, Otis gave a small cry and scrambled from the chair where he had been sitting so long. The fuss, he grasped, and the bureau man's with them. And see you next time for Chapter 8, Exchange. Thanks to everyone for stopping by, hanging around, checking this out in the future. And, probably should, yeah, let's see if there's somebody to raid. Oh, yes, of course. It is Flintlock's birthday today. So if anyone wants to stop by and say hi and a happy birthday, I think she'd appreciate your hellos. Thanks for stopping by. See you all next time for Exchange.